Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with pumpkin scones with toasted pine nuts and maple glaze. That's right, we're doing a wintry twist on our classic scones recipe, and it helped me use up the last of my pumpkin puree. I didn't want to keep that stuff around for another year, so this is perfect if you have some leftover pumpkin, and if you don't, buy some. Why do you only have to use pumpkin at Thanksgiving and Halloween? Come on, you can make this anytime. So step one here, we're going to prep our dry ingredients, which means we put some flour in a bowl, some white all-purpose flour. We're going to add some white sugar, a little bit of salt, some baking powder, and a little baking soda. And then we're going to take a whisk and we're going to mix this thoroughly. And we do that so we don't have to sift it. Sifting is very old school, and not good old school like the movie, bad old school like memorizing dates we could look up on the internet. All right, so give it a mix for about a minute. And at that point, we're going to introduce the ice cold butter. So you know the trick. Cube up your butter, throw it in the freezer for 10 minutes so it's nice and cold. And then we're going to take our pastry cutter. We're going to go ahead and keep smashing that against the bottom of the bowl. And what happens is that butter gets cut into tiny little pieces that kind of integrate into the flour. And the longer you do it, the smaller the pieces get. But you don't want to go too small. All right, you want lots of little tiny chunks of butter. So keep doing that until it basically looks like that. Some people say it looks like oatmeal. So kind of a coarse crumb. And once you've cut in your fat, butter in our case, we're going to go ahead and add the wet ingredients. So I'm going to make a little well with a fork. I'm going to dump in my pumpkin puree. That's just pure pumpkin. I'm going to throw in some buttermilk and a handful of toasted pine nuts. And then I'm going to take the tip of my fork and start mixing it together. All right, just working in the center. Once that starts to come together, I'm going to bring in a little more of the flour. And I'm going to keep mixing it with that fork, but not all the way. All right, as soon as it looks like that, I want you to stop and dump it onto a well-floured board, because we're going to finish mixing in the flour while we shape this. And I know you're scared because it doesn't look that good yet, but don't worry. Make sure your hands are well floured. Simply pat it into a rectangular shape. All right, just like that. And then we're going to do like a letter fold. So bring up a third. All right, bring up the other third over the top like that. A little more flour. Pat it down. Try to get it off the board. If you have a little bit that sticks, totally normal. Don't worry. Just put a little flour down. You can put your dough right on those scraps. They will get absorbed back in. Again, we're going to pat that into a rectangular shape. Fold it up again like a letter. All right, turn it. Pat it back out. Again, use as much flour on your hands and the board as necessary. And I do that 3 times. Flouring, folding, and patting it back out to a rectangle. And if you've watched our world-famous buttermilk biscuit recipe, you'll notice I do the same thing. And I really like what this does to the texture. I think it creates lots of layers and helps with the rising. How many layers? I'm not sure, because I believe to figure that out you need square roots. And I'm sorry, but I'm just not a big fan of square roots. I love the roots, but square roots, not so much. So anyway, after my third fold, I'm going to pat that into a rectangle, and I'm going to cut these in 6 squares. And then, because as you well know, people love pointy food, I'm going to cut each square diagonally into 2 triangles. All right, just like that. Oopsie. I almost just cut the corner off that one. Let me fix that. What is it, November? That is the first knife skills mistake I've made this year. It's pretty good. All right. So after those are cut, I'm going to transfer those onto a lined baking sheet. I'm going to give them a little brush with an egg wash. That's just a beaten egg. I'm also going to give them a little sprinkling of white sugar just to add an extra step. And then those are going to go in a preheated 400-degree oven for about 15 to 20 minutes or until golden brown and done looking. All right, they're going to look like that. All right, if you did everything right, they should be fairly beautiful. And of course, I have to grab the one with the screwed up corner. And by the way, you're going to be amazed at how light these are. Not dense and heavy, light and gorgeous. So you're going to transfer those onto a wire rack to cool while you make your maple glaze, which is so incredibly easy. How easy? I'm not even really going to give you a recipe. You're going to take a couple heaping spoons of powdered sugar. You're going to drizzle in a little bit of maple syrup. And just a tiny splash of milk, just enough to make a thin, spreadable glaze. And as I started mixing this with the spoon, I realized this is not the right tool for this. What I need is a freakishly small metal whisk. Oh yeah, that's much better. I'm assuming you all have one of these in your utensil drawer. All right. And when that's thoroughly mixed and completely smooth, you're done. Now, of course, you're going to adjust this. If it seems a little thin, throw another spoon of sugar in. If it seems too thick, give it a couple drops of milk. All right? Very simple to do. And once the glaze is done, you're going to spread it over the tops of those scones. And just because I use maple glaze doesn't mean you have to. You could do an orange glaze. a lemon glaze. As the Spanish bakers are always saying, you are the patron of your scone. So you top it with what you want. And of course, like all simple icings, it's going to be very wet when it goes on, but it will dry up and tighten up as it sits. And once those are glazed, you're done. Pumpkin scones with toasted pine nuts and a simple maple icing. So let me take a bite of this. So delicious. Not too moist, not too dry, just right. So anyway, you got a friend coming over on a chilly day to share a cup of coffee or tea. You should make a batch of these. Those, as my British friends would say, would go down a treat. So I hope you give these a try. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.